What if I told you that one of the greatest legends in Celtics history just threw a cold bucket of water on the team's hopes for next season? Yeah, I'm talking about Bob Cousy, 97 years old, still sharp as ever, and not holding back when it comes to what he thinks about the 2025 to 2026 Boston Celtics. And let's just say, it wasn't exactly a glowing review. But before we dive into what the old-school icon had to say, we got to lay the groundwork here, because this upcoming season is going to be unlike anything Celtics fans have seen in over a decade. For the first time in what feels like forever, Boston's walking into a season without their cornerstone, without the guy who's been the face of the franchise since he first put on that green and white jersey, Jason Tatum. Whether you love him or criticize him, there's no denying that Tatum's been the anchor. His durability, his leadership, his scoring ability, his presence on both ends, all of that is suddenly gone. And that opens up a massive, gaping question mark. Can Jaylen Brown and Derek White carry the load? Are they enough to keep Boston not only afloat, but competitive? Bob Cousy doesn't think so. And look, when a guy with 6 championships, multiple MVPs, and decades of basketball wisdom speaks, you listen. You might not agree, but you listen. He said, and I quote, "In my judgment, Jaylen is not quite at the superstar level that Tatum is at. Can he carry the load by himself? I see a major rebuilding effort here. Jaylen certainly won't bring them to the promised land. Derek White's a good player, and he'll produce, and he'll be consistent. But his game doesn't lend itself to carrying a team." Now look, that's a tough pill to swallow for Celtics fans. Some might call it harsh. Others might say it's just honesty from someone who's seen generations of basketball come and go. But there's no denying, that's a real shot at the 2 players who now sit at the top of the food chain in Boston. Is Cousy wrong? That's where this conversation gets interesting. Let's start with Derek White. Because as quiet and unassuming as he is off the court, his game speaks volumes. No, he's not the flashiest. He's not going to have fans lining up for his signature shoot anytime soon. But what he does on the floor, it's clean, it's efficient, it's high IQ basketball. And more importantly, when Tatum was out last season, White stepped the hell up. In the small sample size we got, just 8 games without JT, White elevated from a solid role player to a borderline star. 21 points per game, 6 assists, shot over 40% from deep on 11 attempts a night. That's not just a fluke. That's elite-level production in a larger role. And let's not ignore the context here. The Celtics went 7-1 in those games where White played without Tatum. That's not nothing. That's not luck. That's a player understanding the moment, stepping up under pressure, and showing he's capable of taking on more responsibility. And he didn't just pad stats. He won games. Meaningful ones. You give that guy a larger platform this season, he could be looking at an all-star selection if Boston racks up wins early. But what about Jaylen Brown? That's the real lightning rod in this whole thing. Because we've seen him operate without Tatum before, and the numbers are pretty eye-opening. Even before he hit his peak, Brown averaged 27 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists per game without JT. Those are superstar-level stats. And yeah, the shooting from outside hasn't always been perfect. He's not Steph Curry, but the effort, the aggression, the production, it's there. Even when defense is keying on him, he raises his volume and still delivers. That says something. Look back at that playoff game against the Sixers when Tatum went down. Jaylen and White combined for 60 points. Brown had a career high in assists, and White was just out there flaming from deep like it was a video game. That was a pressure moment. That was playoff intensity. That wasn't December in Detroit. That was the Eastern Conference semifinals. And they showed out. So, is Cousy being unfair here? I don't think he's trying to diss anyone. I think he's just calling it how he sees it. Without Tatum, Boston's ceiling is lower. And he's probably right. Tatum is a top 10 player in the league when healthy. But here's where I push back. Jaylen Brown and Derek White aren't just the best offensive players on the team this season. They're also the best defensive ones. Both have earned all defensive nods. You can't say that about anyone else in this rotation right now. And that matters a lot in a long, grueling NBA season. The rest of this roster? Man, it's full of question marks. Anthony Simons? A walking bucket, sure, but defensively, he's a liability. Doesn't even look like he's trying on that end. Can he be salvaged into a good team defender? Maybe, but that's wishful thinking. Nemi's quota has played, what, 600 NBA minutes total? Chris Boucher's 32 and never been a plus defender on the perimeter. Peyton Pritchard is undersized, Sam Hauser's got a bad back, and Jordan Walsh, he's barely touched an NBA court. You go down the list, and you see the problem. Xavier Tillman's knees are questionable. Luka Garza? Man can't defend a tree. Josh Minot and Baylor Shireman are unknowns. Hugo Gonzalez? A raw prospect who's probably fouling out before halftime at this stage. There is no proven interior defender on this team. That put an incredible amount of pressure on Brown and White, not just to score, but to anchor a defense that might be hanging on by a thread. So yeah, Kuzi's comments sting, but he's not pulling them out of nowhere. There is real reason for concern about how far this team can go without JT. But it also feels like an oversimplification to put it all on the shoulders of Jalen and Derek. They're not just expected to score. They're expected to lead, defend, set the tone, carry the locker room, handle the media, and somehow keep Boston relevant in the East. And that's why this season is going to be fascinating. Not just because of what's missing, but because of what could emerge. Maybe Jalen takes that leap and finally earns the respect that his stats have been screaming for years. Maybe Derek White becomes the glue guy all-star we never expected. Maybe both guys prove that they're more than just sidekicks, that they can actually keep the Celtics competitive until their star returns. Because make no mistake, this isn't just a survive-the-season type of year. The front office is still trying to stay financially flexible, maybe even get under the luxury tax line, but they're not tearing it down. Brad Stevens isn't out here rebuilding. He's retooling. And that means pressure on these guys to produce wins now, not 2 years from now. Every game matters. Every stretch without injuries is gold. Every win buys you more time, more flexibility, and more breathing room in a brutal Eastern Conference. So, Celtics fans, I'm asking you, how confident are you? Scale of 1 to 10. Where's your faith in Jaylen Brown and Derek White to hold this thing together? Is this going to be a disaster like Kuzi seems to think? Or is this the moment where these two step out from under Tatum's shadow and remind the world just how deep the Celtics culture really runs? Now, while we've been talking about what's happening on the court, let's not forget that the real game, the one that often determines championships, is happening in the front office. And when it comes to managing cap space, luxury tax penalties, and roster construction, the Boston Celtics are walking a tightrope. The reality is, this isn't just about X's and O's anymore. This is about dollars and cents. It's about how far this organization can stretch their resources while staying competitive without going completely over the financial cliff. And let's be honest here, Boston spent the last 3 seasons living well over the luxury tax line. They were deep in it, like $40 million deep. That's the kind of spending that screams, we're chasing a title no matter what. And to be fair, it worked. They finally raised that 18th banner, and for that reason alone, you can justify every penny. But now, that bill has come due, and the repeater penalties that come from being a consistent taxpayer, they're no joke. If you stay in the tax too long, the league starts hitting you with fines and restrictions that make it almost impossible to build a sustainable winner. So now, the Celtics are trying something different. They're not blowing it up, they're not tanking, but they are pivoting. They're trimming fat, restructuring deals, and exploring every possible angle to get under that luxury tax threshold. Right now, they're just about $12 million above the line. $12 million. And while that might sound like a manageable number in today's NBA economy, the real challenge is how to get below it without gutting the roster or giving away valuable assets for free. Because here's the thing. If the Celtics can stay under the tax for 2 straight seasons, those repeater penalties go away. They get a clean slate. And from that moment forward, they can go back to being aggressive spenders again when Jason Tatum is fully back in a mix. That's the plan. Ride this out, develop the talent they've got, stay frugal for a couple years, and then go all in again once the window reopens with a fully healthy core. But how do they actually do it? That's where it gets tricky. The most obvious target right now is Anthony Simons. $27 million expiring contract. A talented scorer, no doubt, but not a long-term fit. Not a defender. Not a leader. just a guy who gets buckets. And if Boston can find a way to move his deal for a cheaper piece, or maybe two cheaper pieces, then suddenly that $12 million gap starts to shrink. Maybe you trade him to a team that's looking for scoring punch off the bench. Maybe you pull off a three-team deal that allows you to bring in some role players on lower salaries and reroute another piece to create cap flexibility. But the issue is that most teams can't take back more money than they're sending out. That's one of the restrictions Boston wants to escape by getting under the first tax apron. Right now, that restriction is in place because they're still over. They're handcuffed. But once they get under that number, they can start making trades where they take in more salary than they send out. They can unlock the full mid-level exception, and they regain the roster-building flexibility they've been missing. It's not just about saving money. It's about regaining control. And here's the chess move that's looming behind the scenes. If the front office can flip Simons into two role players making $15 million or less combined, and then maybe attach Xavier Tillman's expiring deal, or even someone like Sam Hauser, that's enough to duck the tax completely. But now you've got to ask yourself, who do you value more in the long term, Hauser or Simons? Because honestly, based on how this roster is constructed, Hauser might be more valuable. He's a shooter, a guy who plays with spacing, understands his role, doesn't need the ball in his hands, and more importantly, he defends better than people give him credit for. Yeah, the injury history is a concern, but if he stays healthy, Hauser is a perfect glue guy next to Tatum when the time comes. Simons, on the other hand, is a redundancy. You've already got scoring from Jalen, from White, and when Tatum returns, there's just not enough ball to go around. So if Boston makes the call, and they say, we're prioritizing flexibility over volume scoring, then Simons is the guy to go. And I'd be shocked if Brad Stevens hasn't already made a few calls exploring that very possibility. That's just who he is. He doesn't make the flashy move. He makes the smart one. When Boston traded Kristaps Porzingis, nobody saw it coming. When they got Simons in the first place, same deal. Stevens is always 5 moves ahead, and that's what makes this next phase so compelling. And let's not forget, the Celtics also just went through an ownership change. That matters. You think the new regime wants to be writing $40 million luxury tax checks without knowing if this team's even a top 4 seed in the East? No way. They want to evaluate, reset a little bit, and then go back in when the time is right. And that starts with this season, being surgical with every move they make, every dollar they spend, every contract they carry. But here's the kicker. If they're going to survive this tax reset without plummeting in the standings, they need internal development. They need guys on cheap contracts to step up and play real minutes. That's where the center position becomes the biggest question mark on the roster. Because right now, it's a mix of maybes and what-ifs. Neemias Queta, Luka Garza, and Amari Williams. That's your center rotation heading into camp. No proven starter, no veteran anchor, just 3 guys with potential and a whole lot to prove. And let's be honest, Queta is probably the guy with the inside track. He came in on a 2-way last year, earned a full contract, and actually gave them some decent minutes when called upon. Not a star, not even a starter yet, but someone who understands his role and plays with toughness. Can he make the leap? That's the gamble. Brad Stevens has had success turning unknown big men into serviceable contributors before. Just ask Luke Cornett or Daniel Tice. This front office has a legit track record of finding undervalued centers and maximizing them. Queta's already talking like a guy who wants to take that next step. He said his focus this offseason has been getting in elite shape, becoming a better decision maker, and improving his finishing around the rim. He wants to increase his free throw attempts, get more aggressive, and even hinted at expanding his range to the three-point line. Not to be a shooter, but to at least be a threat when left open. That mindset matters. That's a player who's not just content with hanging around. He's trying to make a real leap. And in the modern NBA, that's how dynasties are built. Not just with talent, but with timing, flexibility, and long-term vision. But before we continue, please remember to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest news about the Boston Celtics. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. The basketball world woke up buzzing today after whispers began circulating that TRAE Young, the dynamic point guard known for his sharp shooting and flashy playmaking, has reportedly reached an agreement to join the Boston Celtics. While no official confirmation has come from either camp, several insiders claim that late-night meetings between Young's representatives and Celtics management took place earlier this week in a high-end hotel in downtown Boston. Sources describe the discussions as productive and mutually enthusiastic, with Boston's front office allegedly eager to pair Young's offensive firepower alongside the already formidable roster. For fans, the mere idea of seeing Young in the iconic green and white is enough to ignite daydreams of deep playoff runs and perhaps another shot at the championship banner that has eluded the franchise since 2008. On social media, hashtags like hashtag #TRAE and hashtag Celtic Era are already trending, with digital mock-ups of Young wearing the Celtics jersey spreading like wildfire. The rumor's momentum grew further after a well-connected sports journalist posted a cryptic tweet featuring only an image of shamrocks and a fire emoji, sending speculation into overdrive. If true, this could be one of the most talked-about moves in recent NBA history, dramatically altering the Eastern Conference landscape. What makes this rumor even more intriguing is the potential strategic shift it would signal for the Celtics. Over the past few seasons, Boston has relied heavily on its two-way stars Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to carry both the scoring load and the defensive responsibilities. While that formula has brought consistent playoff appearances, critics have argued that the team lacks a pure floor general who can orchestrate the offense and break down defenses with surgical precision. Trae Young, averaging over 9 assists per game during his career, would fit that bill perfectly, giving Boston a true facilitator who can also pull up from deep without hesitation. Reports suggest that the Celtics front office has long admired Young's ability to manipulate pick-and-roll situations, a skill that could synergize beautifully with the team's versatile big men. However, skeptics point out that Young's defensive shortcomings might clash with Boston's defensive identity, traditionally one of the most disciplined in the league. Yet, those in favor argue that his offensive upside more than compensates, especially in tight playoff battles where a single shot creator can make all the difference. This alleged move, if it materializes, would be a bold departure from Boston's recent roster philosophy and could redefine their offensive schemes entirely. The financial implications of this possible deal are also a hot topic among analysts and fans alike. Trae Young is currently on a lucrative long-term contract, and bringing him to Boston would require significant cap maneuvering, potentially involving the departure of key rotation players or draft picks. Some speculate that the Celtics could offload a mix of expiring contracts and young talent to make room for Young's salary, while others believe a more complex multi-team trade could be in the works. The front office's willingness to commit to such a blockbuster acquisition would indicate a win-now mentality, signaling that they are prepared to sacrifice future flexibility for immediate championship contention. There are also whispers that ownership is willing to absorb luxury tax penalties if it means putting together a roster capable of unseating perennial Eastern Conference rivals like the Milwaukee Bucks and Miami Heat. Negotiations of this magnitude are rarely straightforward, and the secrecy surrounding the talks has only fueled the mystique. Whether it's a masterstroke or a risky gamble, pursuing Young would undeniably change the financial and competitive trajectory of the Celtics for years to come. For now, all eyes remain glued to insider updates and late-night trade rumor threads. Fan reaction to the potential move has been nothing short of electric. In Boston, sports bars are already filled with heated debates over whether Trae Young is the missing piece to a championship puzzle that has been tantalizingly close yet painfully out of reach. Supporters envision a backcourt pairing of Young and Marcus Smart, or potentially Derek White, blending offense and grit, while detractors worry about ball dominance and chemistry disruptions. Some longtime Celtics followers, steeped in the franchise's tradition of team-oriented play, express reservations about adding a high-usage player whose style is often described as heliocentric. Yet even skeptics admit that Young's ability to create highlight reel plays and energize a crowd could inject new life into the TD Garden atmosphere. The idea of combining his deep shooting range with Tatum's scoring versatility and Brown's slashing ability has many imagining an offense nearly impossible to guard. In Atlanta, meanwhile, Hawks fans are bracing for a potential new era without their franchise cornerstone, with some voicing frustration over management's direction. Regardless of where one stands on the debate, the buzz is undeniable, and anticipation is building as the rumor mill spins faster with each passing hour. If this deal comes to fruition, it would mark one of the most stunning player moves in recent Celtics history, potentially rivaling the seismic trades that brought Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen to Boston in 2007. Back then, the acquisitions reshaped the league's power structure overnight, and a TRAE Young signing could have a similar ripple effect across the NBA landscape. Rival coaches would need to rethink defensive schemes, analysts would adjust championship predictions, and ticket sales would almost certainly surge. Moreover, the move could have cultural ramifications for the team, shifting them toward a more up-tempo, offense-first philosophy that contrasts with their historically defense-centric reputation. Young himself would face the challenge of adapting to Boston's intense media scrutiny and the weight of lofty expectations from one of the most passionate fan bases in sports. Yet, for all the uncertainty, there's also a sense of thrilling possibility. The prospect of a young, fearless playmaker taking the helm of Boston is the kind of narrative that excites the league and captivates casual fans. Until official statements are made, this remains firmly in the realm of speculation. But in the world of basketball rumors, sometimes smoke really does mean fire. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Boston Celtics, please subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. We always appreciate your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.